Let me paint a picture for you. You need lots of boot space so you can pick up whatever type of surfing is trendy this week. But you don't want a massive SUV because you're either conscious about the climate or the reputation of those cars or their owners. You fancy a hot hatchback, but you cannot show up in a bewinged lunatic as is the Civic Type R. You want a reliable car, but you don't want to disappear in a sea of grey German estates. Worry no longer, because CUPRA has just got the car for you. Welcome to the Leon Sports Tourer e-hybrid. Now all the group's brands get the top-level hybrids, which are pitted against the GTI level spec cars. The hybrids develop the same 245 horsepower as the GTI level cars, but with more torque and more weight. Responsible for the power delivery is an electric motor that sits at the rear axle, in tandem together with a decommissioned 1.4 litre petrol engine that they have nicked from my Touran and is mated to a 6-speed DSG gearbox. Could this then be a viable alternative to the Golf GTI? Style-wise, it's the Formentor's marginally less fashionable ground floor neighbour. It is a good-looking estate though. It rides a bit lower than the regular Leon and comes on these optional 19-inch copper wheels that might not be to everybody's taste, but I like them. Then we have the typical creases and angular light graphics painted by LEDs. Back in the comfortable CUPRA sports seats. Interestingly enough though, the seating position in the Formentor felt a bit better. That's probably due to the entire car being set higher, including the dashboard, so you feel better cocooned in the crossover. Imagine back then in the review I had said something like I'd prefer the lower seating position of the Leon. I'd look like such a fool. And as in the Formentor, there is gesture control. So if Fruit Ninja is your favorite game, you will have a blast chopping up the unsuspecting air in front of the infotainment screen, and you will only look 30% ridiculous doing so. The car is in EV mode, which is fitting as I have become sort of an EV expert over the past few weeks. A quite usable 60 kilometers of range are supposed to be available from the electric motor, which sits at the rear axle and doesn't intrude on boot space too much. I think that should suffice for most commutes. It would certainly fit my family's usage pattern. It's quite nippy around town, but what if you approach motorway speeds? Because that is certainly not to the electric motor's taste. But that's where the petrol engine comes in. If you have watched the review of my own Touran, you will remember that I said the engine is adequate for bumbling about. But when pushed, it is overwhelmed, as well as the DSG gearbox, which throws its arms in the air and frantically looks for an adequate speed and rarely finds the right one. It is the same thing here, if the batteries are flat. Without charge, you end up with a shiny looking Touran, so you want to keep the batteries topped up as much as possible. But with 7 to 8 hours of charging from a regular socket, charging at home without an expensive wall box might become realistic for you. But if the battery is charged, you get reasonable straight line performance. Straight line, huh? Well, the thing is this really a performance car? You could argue it is, since it is under the CUPRA brand. But then, if you look at the tires, they are not terribly grippy. Now, there isn't a ton of grip at the front. But now you could say, well, the electric motor is at the back, so you could cure that understeer with a dollop of gas to provoke a reaction from the back end. Well, you can provoke a reaction from the back end. The problem is that reaction is not very predictable. So you have the electric motor at the back trying to break traction without a limited slip diff. You have the petrol engine at the front desperately pulling at the front wheels. And if you push this button in the middle that is very prominently placed, you can either dial the traction control back, or you can turn it off completely. And what happens then is you end up in a three-way fight between You and the axles, with everybody shouting and flailing their arms around, and all that is accompanied by synthesized V8 thunder. But once all four wheels do have grip, you can make for rapid progress. Just remember to keep the batteries charged. I have always liked hybrids, especially the LaFerrari 918 Spider and Valkyrie sort, where the electric motor is there to help bridge the torque gap. And the electric only range is also nice. If we ran this as our family car, it would run most of the time on electricity, and only for the few long-distance journeys would we need petrol. However, I couldn't stop thinking about the 300 horsepower 2-liter petrol engine, which would probably not deliver the same torque to the rear wheels, but would be more predictable. So which one would I choose? The 2-liter Formentor or the hybrid Leon? I think I would go for the 2-liter petrol engine, which means the Formentor. What? Don't make me say it. People could hear that I'm recommending a crossover.